Week 1 was not kind to teams in the FLS Power Poll. We'll preview Week 2 action around Fredericksburg area high school football coming up on this week's Varsity 360, and it starts right now. Hi there, folks, and welcome to Varsity 360's Gridiron Report. I'm Mark Coleman from the Virginia Varsity Sports Network, V2SN, here to take a look at the top stories in Fredericksburg area high school football. Each week I have a chance to meet with some of my very good friends from the Freelance Star and their sports department. This week I have two of the very best. Joining me from the Freelance Star, we have sports reporter Nathan Warters. Nathan, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. You got the eye of the tiger today.
Yeah, how about that? We also have assistant sports editor Justin Rice. Justin, how are you, man?
Hi, Mark.
Well, you know, it was not a laughing matter to be ranked in the Freelance Star's Power Poll this past week, for the preseason at least. It seemed like there were some marks on these teams' backs, and there were some teams, I was about to say struggle, maybe not struggle, but there certainly were some challenging games for them, starting with the overall #1 seed in the preseason, Colonial Forge. Nathan, you were down in Richmond for this game at Highland Springs, 36-13. Forge looks like they've got some things to correct.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest lesson of that game was I think they saw some things that they need to kind of shore up and improve on. They played well. They had some really big plays. I think they could have been in it had they not, you know, inflicted some real big mistakes there. They had some really big turnovers, one fumble they lost in the end zone for a touchdown. Gary Jennings, their quarterback slash cornerback slash wide receiver slash punt returner slash everything, had a 99-yard interception return called back by a block in the back penalty. They dropped a touchdown right before the kid went out of bounds in the back of the end zone. They left a lot of points on the board. Afterwards, they didn't really seem like, hey, this is the sky is falling, we're going to fix this and move on. And Highland Springs is a really good football team. They were ranked 4th and in the Richmond papers, you know, top 25 or whatever they do. And you know, they're one of the best teams in that area, and they showed it on Friday night.
It still has to be a little bit distressing, though. This is a team that has state championship aspirations, and they were handled pretty thoroughly. Still early, though, you're right.
Yeah, and the thing that impressed me is that I think they have really good leadership on the team, and I noticed that afterwards that they were, obviously they were angry, but there were some kids on that team that weren't going to let that happen again, and, right. I really noticed that. And I think this team is going to still do good things this year. We've seen teams come back from losses before. Colonial Forge, like we said last week, they have like the roughest schedule that they've had. Well, it's the same one they had last year, but it's a rough schedule. Right. They're going to have to maneuver through this before they get to the games that are really going to dictate where they go in the playoffs. And they're a playoff team, so they just got to get better as each week goes. And you know, I think they're good enough and talented enough to still do big things this year.
Okay. Yeah, I think importantly, no team decided their playoff fate last Thursday or Friday. There's one team, ask me later about it, who I think did a lot to help themselves for the playoffs, but nobody is done because of what happened in week 1. You still have 10 more weeks to improve and get better and so on and win games. Yeah,
that's true, although I saw a couple of statistics this past week, actually from VHSL reference, and I'm not sure exactly how accurate their stats are, but I think it's a reputable site, certainly. Something like 80% of teams that win their first game make the playoffs. I'm not sure how that really is possible, but it was a large number. Teams that score more than 40 points and win, it's like 87% of the time they make the playoffs. I don't know. I mean,
those are fun numbers to play with early in the year.
You got to have something to talk about.
They don't mean a thing.
Right?
I'm not ready to. Of course, teams that score 40 points or more in their first week make the playoffs. Teams that score 40 or more points are pretty good teams. How many bad teams have even terrible teams have games where they score 40 points? Yeah, I love stats. I don't like that.
How dare you bring that?
How dare you?
Wow. Okay. Rough crowd tonight, I tell you. Well, how about we move on to number 2 then? Number 2, Courtland. was pretty well throttled by a team that scored 40 points against them. Massaponax put a 42 on them, winning that one 42-3. Now, this was a home game for Ponax. A couple of rivals, they play each other quite often, but that number is still a little bit alarming there.
This was the result, the surprise result of the week for me. Not necessarily that Massaponax won. Massaponax has played really well against Courtland the last half decade or so. But for it to not even really be a game, I know Joey Benden, the guy you're really high on, the new quarterback for Massaponax, had a real nice game in his debut. And Massaponax looks like they picked up right where they left off. You know, long season to go, but gosh, they sure look sharp in the week one for as many guys as they had to replace.
No kidding, next man up type thing. So Joey Benden, 13 carries, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns running. He also added a touchdown pass. I think he only made 3 attempts passing the ball, but one of them was for a short touchdown. It looks like this Ponax offense was clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, more than 300 yards rushing again.
The defense also pretty impressive, though. They held those, the 3-headed rushing monster from Courtland to, I think, the 3 of them combined for only 99 yards rushing. So a pretty good job on the defensive side of the ball as well.
Absolutely, but and as I said though, if you look at Courtland in the last 5 years or so against Massaponax, not really fared well, and furthermore, this game against Massaponax has never been a good indicator of where Courtland is going to end up in terms of the results of the season. So
very true.
We'll see, and you've got lots of time, but gosh, that's definitely the surprise result to me. Massaponax big over Courtland.
It's a good indicator of where Massaponax is, though, and I think their demise was greatly exaggerated. And we went to their practices, and we go to these things, and the coaches kind of hem and haw. We don't know how good we're going to be. We got a lot of turnover, this and that. Massaponax has always had talent. They've always had skill. They've always had these big kids on defense to stop the run and to do what they did on Friday. Yes, we ranked them 7th, and apparently we hurt a lot of feelings by that. My apologies. Preseason rankings are very arbitrary. I think people should know that. But Massaponax will be very close to the top of our poll, if not at the top, when that comes out this week.
The ironic thing about bitter tears about Massaponax's ranking is Massaponax is a team that will beg us to rank them 10th, 11th, 12th. They will beg us to do that.
Well, their fans certainly
and
did,
then we quasi-oblige, and the fans think we hate Massaponax.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
We have no ill will towards Massaponax.
Or anyone else for that matter.
No.
I mean,
Other than you, no.
Okay, I'm not even sure where to go with that. How about we move on to the next game then? Number 3 in the power poll. We finally have a winner here, although it was a close one. James Monroe, number 3, squeaks out a 24-23 overtime victory over a 6A club, Stafford. But this was a tight game. Justin, you were at this game.
This was a good game, and Gary Boxley, the new linebacker for James Monroe, one of the Caroline kids that came over, makes a great play on a 2-point conversion in overtime to save the game. Stafford scores in their possession to maybe tie it up. They opt to go for 2 when they could have kicked it and gone to another overtime. They go for 2. Boxley runs down Zevin Holly with no yards to spare, last guy to get him, and saves the day for JM. I think the things I took away from this game is, number 1, Stafford improved. As long as they can stick to that running game, Holly is good. Stephen Harris, their fullback nose tackle, he looked great. He had a great night. He's going to roll up yards. If they can stay behind or in front of the chains and not get behind big in games and can just keep pounding the ball, Stafford's going to do really well this year. They're not a bad team. And then number 2 with JM, I think the question now we're going to ask about JM is the same question we asked all of last year. Can the Jackets run the ball? Who's going to be the ball carrier? And can they, or is it just going to be Scroggins? Frankly, on Friday night, it was a lot of Scroggins, and he was he started off a little slow, but was very good at times. And the new receiver, Keyshawn Johnson, he and Jamal Bevels, who graduated, same player. So they've replaced that, and there's going to be openings in the passing game. The running game, they still got some work to do, and I know Coach Survey is pretty old school and wants to be able to run the ball. JM's got some work to do in that department.
Okay. So Scroggins ended up 15 of 33, 215 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. Stephen Harris, as you mentioned, 18 carries, 102 yards and a touchdown rushing.
Yeah, he's like a bowling ball. He's probably shorter than 5'10", probably 200 and 245 pounds. He lines up the first guy back in the I set, and they just hand it to him up the middle at the triple option, and he's tough to bring down. He gets moving straight ahead, real tough to bring down. That kid looks like 4 yards every time he touches the ball.
Wow. And the Indians were actually up 17-0 at one point in this game.
Indeed, behind the running game, JM sort of struggled to stop it. Stafford made some mistakes. They had 4 fumbles lost in the whole game, 3 in the second half when they could really just eat clock and put the game away, and they did not. JM comes back, Scroggins throws a great touchdown in overtime, and there you go. JM is 1-0, and yeah,
it's a win in the a tally in the win column.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, all right, well, good for them. Let's move on to Mountain View. Mountain View went on the road for this one and visited Verona. It was a road game, correct?
No, they were at home.
It was a home game. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. So Verona came and visited them and didn't act like the courteous guest that you'd like for them to be. Verona winning that one relatively easy, 33-7. Nathan, you were at this game.
Yeah, and that was one of those games where it's just big play after big play after big play by Verona, back-breaking plays, and Mountain View's a really young football team with a lot of new guys on defense and offense. I think the defense, I was talking to their senior captain, Adam Hassan, their linebacker, and he was saying that there was a lot of times where they didn't line up correctly. They were kind of getting a little confused. Nerves might have been an issue, just first game. And then when you're playing Verona, which like Highland Springs was a top 5 team in the Richmond area, you can't make mistakes like that. I mean, Verona, I think their shortest scoring drive or their longest scoring drive was 2 plays. They had 3 or 4 drives that were just one play.
That's a good stat. You see those
50, 60-yard gains, and how are you going to win a football game? And Mountain View did a really good job of they were moving down the field and doing a lot of really good things on offense, and they would eat clock, and something would happen in the red zone where they couldn't get in the end zone, and then they'd give the ball back, and then all of a sudden one play, Verona's down the field. And those are just things that a young team, you see that a lot. You see that a lot in first games. And, this is a team that lost, like, we were talking before, going to air, is they lost to Verona last year. They recovered. They went 8-4. I think this team has that kind of ability, that kind of talent to do the same thing.
Sure. I think that's an important lesson from the first week is Highland and Verona are 2 very good teams.
Yes.
Absolutely agreed, but you do like to measure up, see where you stand. Sure. It's not the end of the world. Both these teams understand that. I think most teams understand that, but you still hope that you can have something to build on at the very least. Moral victories aren't something you necessarily want to fight for, but losing is never fun.
No, I think it also illustrates the importance of, or the value of having a veteran team coming back. And yeah. I look at Colonial Forge, and they have a lot of veterans, but I wouldn't look at that team and per se say they are a veteran team, because they've got a lot of new guys on their team, particularly on defense. Mountain View is a completely new team pretty much, other than, they have 4 seniors that played last year. It started last year. So you're talking about teams that are playing against veteran teams from bigger areas that are, ranked really high, and you sometimes you just got to kind of look at it and say, let's learn from it and keep going and move on for the future.
Elijah Burris, 12 of 31 passing with a touchdown and 11 carries for 81 yards rushing. Not a bad game, but the report was that he injured his left hand, actually, I guess, early in that game. What's the latest news on that?
No definitive news on it. I talked to him after the game, and it's his non-throwing hand, as you said. It's going to affect him just in terms of pain, and it was very painful. He told me on Friday night he played almost the entire game with it. It happened early. The injury happened early. He hyperextended it while being tackled, so he just kind of bent it back. He told me, if they want to cut it off, they can cut it off. He's going to play. So they went and had x-rays.
Ronnie Lott style?
Yeah, they went and had x-rays taken. I do believe it was on Friday. We tried to track down their coach this week. It's still early in the week, but we haven't gotten any definitive word. But I've seen him on Twitter talking about next week's game. I'm pretty sure he's going to be. Yeah. And about his stats, it was one of those games where you saw a lot of drop passes. Some of his passes, they weren't he didn't have the touch that you would expect out of a senior, but it was an early game. I think the drops were the main thing. I mean, they had a touchdown dropped in the end zone. They had a couple really big 4th down passes dropped. So that's another thing you see from young teams playing in their first game is you see these, self-inflicted wounds. So.
Well, that's a look at the. Actually, no. Let's go to number 5. We have another Power Poll team that won. Yeah, a big one actually. So number 5, Eastern View, with a 52-28 victory over Charlottesville. Nathan, you seem to be really making the rounds. You were at this game as well. No, you weren't at the game, but you've reported on it because there was some pretty impressive statistics, or at least one impressive statistic that came out of this one.
Yeah, Kendrick Kuby, the running back for Eastern View, he rushed for 414 yards and 6 touchdowns on 27 carries. So it wasn't like he was running 40 times like some guys do. This is it seemed like it was kind of a bizarre game because it started out 22-0 in favor of Eastern View. If they do put on the throttle and get the game out of hand there in the third quarter, he's not running the football in the second half. Right. Charlottesville comes back, makes it 22-21. They need QB. QB continues to run, and it's big play, big play, big play, big play. So big game by their offensive line, big game by their perimeter blockers, their wide receivers, their other backs. Huge game by him. His coach, Greg Hatfield, told me yesterday that he's on the radar for Division I schools. A lot of coaches have told him, we want to see your senior tape. This is a good way to start your senior season.
I would say so. I would say
14 or 15 yards a carry over 27-yard carries. That's difficult to do. That's hard to do.
That is very hard to do and quite impressive to be able to accomplish.
And a very impressive way to win. Teams go up 22-0 and then it's 22-21. It's really easy for a team to regress and not get down on themselves and definitely get down on themselves. But this team, they rallied. They put it on there in the second half and got the job done, especially behind this really impressive performance by QB.
Eastern View's got weapons. They're going to score points. We saw that last year. Most of those kids are back. Eastern View's going to score a lot of points, and I definitely like them against most of their schedule this year. Eastern View's going to win games and score points.
Yep. By the way, by way of the 27 carries, 414 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns, Kendrick Kuby is the Freelance Star Player of the Week. So congratulations to Kendrick from Eastern View.
That's a career for a lot of kids.
No doubt.
414 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's cool.
It's close to an area record too. We've had a couple 400-yard games, I do believe. There was a kid for Essex back in '97 who had like 438. So that's really close to getting up there and to area record status. Is actually close to getting in the top 10 for the VHSL.
Right.
So those numbers are very impressive.
I'm sure schools will take notice. At every level. Yeah, that's impressive stuff there. Let's take a look at some other games from around the area, and we will start with Riverbend and Chancellor. We actually have a couple of video highlights for this one. Guys, this Bear Raid offense certainly got off to a fast start. First plays from scrimmage from their own 11-yard line. Jordan DeMarco drops back, hits Chris Pritchett in stride at the 50. He takes it in the rest of the way from there. 89 yards on the opening play, and that was pretty much the story of the game there. Dakota Sexton was running all over the place. Riverbend was missing their top 2 running backs. They end up winning this game 48-20 over Chancellor. Pretty impressive start.
I'll say this about Riverbend. We were talking about Masponics in the poll. That's a team where I think before we started our preseason process, we were really high on. We sort of let ourselves get talked a little soft into them, and they ended up just outside of our top 5. I think a lot of people look at this Riverbend team before this preseason go. That's a team that's going to be good this year. So to see them start 48-20, I'm not surprised. And we talked about this in our season preview edition of Varsity 360. I like Riverbend to go start 5-0. I really do. My question is game 6, game 7, game 8, game 9, game 10.
We started 5-0 last year.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yep.
So good job. Keep it up. You're going to keep tuning up and getting better. Call me in week 7.
Week 7, huh? Okay. And I think that's fair. That's a very fair comment. They recognize that. I think we all recognize that the first half of their schedule is, I'll say it's softer than the second half of their schedule. I wouldn't say it's entirely soft.
And I don't want to understand. They play good football teams who practice just as hard as anybody else in these first 5 weeks. But they open up against a lot of teams that they have a manpower advantage on because they're a Division 6 school. They're going to open up against some 4s and so on and so forth. I like Riverbend this year. I really do. I think Zach Sims is a great running back. I think the offense got a good chance to succeed. I think they've got some nice receivers, good weapons, but they've got to prove it against the really quality teams. Chancellor, improved,
absolutely.
Still very young.
Still very young. A lot of sophomores. They're going to have some talent on that. Barring
Quincy Postbanks at receiver. Good ball player. still, they played a lot of freshmen last year. Now they're going to play a lot of sophomores. Next year they're going to play a lot of juniors, and the year after that they're going to play a lot of seniors.
And talking to the coaching staff, so I was at this game, talking to the coaching staff before the game from Chancellor. They were very impressed by the way that the team has gelled together. You know, they've been the coaches have been associated with Chancellor for a number of years, and they felt like there was really something special about this group of kids. And you know, those are the kind of stories that you like to hear about. You know, with kids that they may not be able to tally a whole lot of wins, but hopefully they're getting something out of this. And
the Chancellor kids are going to mature, and they're going to win ball games this year. They're not going 1-9 again this year.
You know, this Riverbend team could be. Who knows? They could be stacked. This could be a 40-point a night, you know, team. They've got the talent,
offense,
you know,
and they've got an offensive scheme that is fun to watch. I mean,
here's my question: am I getting a little love for the Bear Raid, or is?
Okay, so T. Nathan Warters is the originator of the Bear Raid offense term. So there you go. I've said it officially, publicly, but I'm going to claim it as my own from here forward.
Well, to close the book on Riverbend, I think the important thing to remember is that teams that score more than 40 points in week 1 make the playoffs something like 80% of the time.
It's a good stat.
I heard that somewhere.
You know what, though, guys, this is a fun team to watch. If you get a chance, if you're in the area and you're looking for a fun game to watch, this is a fun offense to watch. They've got pretty good on defense as well, but you know, they hold up the crazy placards to call plays on the sidelines. I was trying to tell, you know, I called this game, so I was trying to announce what the placards were saying. You know, they have like Men in Black and Despicable Me and different colleges and stuff. So even if you don't know what's going on, and maybe that helps to make you not know what's going on, it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch. But Chancellor, a strong team as well. I want to make sure that comes out there. A good team there. Another close game, though, was played. Washington and Lee with, I think, a little bit of an upset, a 46-44 overtime victory over King George. There was a lot of running in this game, as far as I can tell. You guys agree?
It's with 6 players go over 100 yards. The 2 teams combined for 700 yards on the ground.
767 yards.
I told you earlier that one team that did the absolute most to help their broad playoff picture, W&L. You know, when you get into the math of how the PowerPoints formula works, W&L is generally going to play single A schools, and they'll generally beat them, and for those schools they'll score 16 points in a week. And those schools will average about 5 wins. So in an average game against an average single A team, W&L will score 26 power points in a given week. Well, taking a 5A or 4A school, W&L scores 22 points, plus you presume that, you know, King George wins an average amount of games, 5. Now W&L scored 32 points for a week. In the playoffs, in the single A bracket, if you average 18, 19, 20 points a week, you're not only going to make the playoffs, you're going to be one of the 4 best seeds in the region. For W&L to have potentially like a 32-point week in week 1 against King George, it's a huge win in the playoffs. W&L, maybe not mathematically, but with the win, I'm certain is a playoff team.
You're calling it already.
Calling it already. Week 1.
Wow.
You score a bunch of points when you're a single A team. You beat a 4A team, and not just a 4A team. A 4A team that I think has a good chance to win some games. That's a huge win for W&L. Unless it all falls apart, W&L will be in the playoffs, and I really like them on the basis of this one win to host playoff games, at least 1, maybe 2, depending on, of course, they've got to win other games.
Sure. But it certainly looks, all indications are that this is going to be a good team. Yeah. The schemes are good, the talent is there, and it sounds like or it looks like the schedule is going to be beneficial to them.
And they scored 40 points.
And they scored 40 points.
But
we knew that coming into the season. W&L had a ton of returners back. They've got Todd Jones is there, the coach. He knows what he's doing. W&L is going to be a good team this year. We knew that before they played King George. I think the more surprise to me was how successful King George was. They put up a lot of rushing yards too in that new single wing that they're running now. Jeremy Jack running it. Colin plays full time. I think King George, despite all they lost, and apparently maybe most on the defensive side without Corey Henderson and without Jordy Estes, I think King George is still a quality team. They've got a long fight. They got a lot of good teams still to play. They've got Riverbend. They've got Louisa. You know, they've got the Battlefield District schedule, of course, Courtland, JM. But then you still have maybe some young teams that you're going to play, Chancellor, Spotsy, Caroline. King George still got a good chance to win some games. I think the scheme gives them a good chance for success.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's go through the 600-yard rushers, as was mentioned. So from Washington and Lee, we've got DJ Weldon, 22 carries, 176 yards, 4 touchdowns. Marion Pollard, 21 carries, 130 yards. Dexter Thompson, 13 carries, 109 yards and a touchdown. And then for King George, we've got Jacoby White, 12 carries, 136 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 2 passing touchdowns, halfback passes there. Jordan Alley, 8 carries, 110 yards, and a touchdown. And Will Clift, 11 carries, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns. I would dare to say that there was probably some work to be done on the tackling mechanics for these two teams, but that's a lot of rushing yards. 767 yards combined rushing. Wow. Well, let's move on from there. So North Stafford, actually this past Thursday, played Petersburg. Didn't have much trouble there. 34-0 victory over Petersburg. Malachi Harrison with a pretty good night for the Wolverines.
My takeaway was also the quarterback situation at North Stafford. They played Pat Ayala and Jimmy Edwards. I think, like I said in the preseason show, that who knows what they were going to do with the quarterback situation. Joe Mangano has, he kind of tweaks that a little bit and he uses one guy over the other, and then a couple games in he'll maybe change his mind or want to put somebody somewhere else. They like to fit guys into certain different spots, and Pat Ayala was a guy they wanted at the middle linebacker spot, and he also played there. But this could be a routine thing where they got a couple guys playing, use both of them, use their skills and help them win football games. Impressive win by them to go on the road, and it seemed like they handled business.
Yeah, I'd like them to beat Petersburg every time, so we'll know more about North Stafford, I think, after this week.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's go through some other scores from around the area. Colonial Beach with a big 52-0 victory over King and Queen. Lamar Lucas, 18 carries, 222 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and threw
he threw for one too.
Another passing touchdown.
Tough luck for that guy to have that performance on a week where another kid had 414 rushing yards.
Yeah,
I mean, he would have clearly been player of the week. So we should give him some love. He was definitely the runner-up in that competition.
Lucas, almost player of the week.
Yeah. Then also from around the area, Culpeper with a bit of a heartbreaking 13-12 loss to Central Lunenburg. Brook Point fell pretty solid to a pretty solid team, 38-13 at Briarwoods. Actually, putting up 13 points against Briarwoods is, there's something there, right? So this Brook Point team still has some growth ahead of them, but that's something to build on at least.
We'll see. This is a young team, and we knew that coming into the season. This would be a young Brook Point team.
Briarwoods is a contender again in the region and the state. So
no doubt.
They lost their quarterback from last year. He's playing at Penn State now, but I went down their roster. They've got 3 or 4 guys that are being recruited heavily by major D1 schools. They've got a ton of talent. So, going on the road and losing to Briarwoods, a lot of teams are going to do that. So, yeah.
Briarwoods goes on the road this week. We'll get to that one in just a bit. Louisa with a 14-2 victory over Spotsylvania. DeJohn Shelton for Louisa with 18 carries, 131 yards, and a rushing touchdown. And then finally, Caroline fell to Glen Allen 34-10.
I think both those games closer than I would have thought. I thought Louisa would more capably handle Spotsylvania. Maybe Spotsylvania is a little better than we thought. And the Caroline Glen Allen score, ends up in a rout, 24-point rout. But I think I got the impression from Taft Coghill that the game was pretty close, and Caroline was in the game and so on, and their quarterback made some plays and so on, and that was a little bit closer than the final score.
Yeah.
So maybe some 3 local teams there that we maybe got to see about.
Well, let's take a look at games coming up for week 2 around the area. And fans, remember, if you like seeing highlight clips on Varsity 360, encourage your head coach or athletic director to provide me with those clips. They can email them to me. I am mark@v2sn.com. You can also tweet me. I am at Mark Coleman, V2SN. Would love to get highlights from around the area of high school football. Certainly would be enjoyable to talk through the highlights on that. So please encourage your coaches and athletic directors to get that to us. Why don't we start with this Forge Briarwoods game? This was a heartbreaking loss for Forge last year. That was at Briarwoods. This year Briarwoods comes down and will be meeting Forge at Forge. What is this game shaping up to be?
No shortage of motivation for Forge. Considering what happened on Friday, their loss at Highland Springs, considering what happened last year, close heartbreaker on the road against Briarwoods. This team has a lot to clean up from last week. A clean game might do it. They stack up talent-wise very closely with Briarwoods, so this could shape up to be a very good contest. The mistakes that happened last week at Highland Springs Briarwoods is going to do just like Highland Springs did and just pounce on them and capitalize. So they're going to have to be a real clean played game for both teams. So
yeah, this is with 3 games. The second of 3 games against Stafford County schools for Briarwoods. They'll play North Stafford as well. Briarwoods again contending for the Stafford County football championship, just like last year. I think what you said there, the most illustrative thing is that last year Forge suffered a loss to Briarwoods, and that's not the end of the season for them. So this year they suffered a loss to Highland. Now you bounce back, you right the ship, and you get a good chance to go out and win a game against a good team.
So I know how much you dislike the statistics, and I don't know the percentage, but if a team goes 0-2, how much does that hurt their playoff chances, do you think?
I think you can still go 8-2 and you're not hurt. You know, how the PowerPoints and how it averages out and so on. It's not like the college football world where losing at 1 point sets you back in the mind of voters. It's still math. And whether or not you lose 2 early or you lose 1 early and use 1 late, it's still just math. And losing to quality teams like a Briarwoods, a team that's going to win 8, 9, 10 games, not going to quite hurt you as much. You know, you got to avoid the big loss. And I would say the big loss is where you lose to a smaller division team that is also not going to win a lot of games. That's a formula disaster for you when it comes to the PowerPoints formula. Highland game, Briarwoods game, for Colonial Forge, your season isn't going to be written. It wasn't written in week 1. It's not going to be written in week 2. It's going to be about the entire body of work. So,
and let's also say this: next week is Hermitage. The week after that is Patrick Henry. Mm-hmm. So you can say 0-2, but you're also looking at potentially further damaging your chances and weeks to follow. Winning this game is not imperative for them. Playing well in this game is. Absolutely. Because if you go 2 games in a row playing sloppy football, that's an indication of where you are. Yeah. So I think, I know that coaching staff is on these kids, and I know the leaders on that team. Like I said, I saw some fiery kids after that game, especially the senior players who were like, this is not going to cut it. So it's going to be a real litmus test kind of game for Colonial Forge. Hermitage, they got to go on the road and play Hermitage.
That team wants to win that game.
The extra point and all that controversy. And then Patrick Henry is a traditional playoff team as well. And then they go into their Commonwealth schedule. We were talking about Riverbend playing, their 5 games and then going into the Commonwealth. Right. They're playing, a murderer's row of opponents going into Ponix, North Stafford. So it's important that they play well.
Absolutely. I think you can look at Riverbend as the bar. Last year, Riverbend was 5-5 and on the bubble at best to make the playoffs. I think you're talking about have to go 6-4. 7-3 is probably pretty safe. So you're playing all these quality teams. You can't keep saying, okay, but we're getting better. Yes, at some point you have to win games. They're not in a must-win situation yet. A win would be really helpful.
Well, and agreed. A good example from last year as well would be Courtland, and that's segueing into the next game, talking about for next week, Riverbend and Courtland. Courtland started 0-2 last year, and then I believe they rattled off 8 wins after that. Yeah. So they lost their opening game against Ponix and then lost to Riverbend. They lost last year. This season they lost big to Massaponix. They'll be taking on Riverbend this coming weekend. What are we looking for in this game?
What Nathan said about Colonial Forge, not necessarily looking at it like we have to win this game, but Courtland has to play better. I think that's what their standard is. Let's be better. Certainly last week isn't what they're after. So you want to be better against a quality team.
And this will be a good indication of, you talked about Riverbend's defense. Where are they defensively? This will be a good test for them to see how they perform against a wing T with those 3 100 or 1,000 yard backs that sure. Courtland has. So it'll be a good indication of where they are defensively. It'll be a good indication of what Courtland can do to improve on what they did last week. It'll also be a good indication of what Riverbend has firepower-wise offensively. If they can do it against Courtland, then maybe they can do it against everybody. Because if you start out doing it against Chancellor and Courtland, you probably got a good chance of having a pretty good year offensively there.
Yeah. I saw this on VHSL Reference. Teams that start off 2-0 against Chancellor and Courtland. I'm just kidding. I don't actually have that stat.
Finally, games around the area this week for week 2. We have JM going up the road to visit North Stafford. This should be an interesting game. I really am looking forward to seeing how this game plays out.
I was talking about the PowerPoints formula with W&L.
Right.
Huge win for JM. If they can come away with this one, it would be a massive win. Division 5 team, a school that's going to win games. You score a lot of points. You've beaten a Division 6 team. I believe in our preview show I predicted JM as a playoff team. JM beats North Stafford this week, and you have my lock. JM is a playoff team because of how the points work out and the formulas work out. You know, it's a massive game for JM. But just like these other teams, your whole season is not written in week 2. You can certainly go and take a loss for JM if you're JM.
This is going to be a really physical football game. And last year at Maury, it came down to brute strength inside. I mean, it was just, you know, North Stafford eventually just wore down JM because they had all those big kids on their line. A lot of those kids are gone. Not that North Stafford doesn't have the strength up front, but it'll be interesting to see how these teams match up, in the trenches, because that's where both these teams like to win their football games.
Well, and can JM run the ball against a good Division 5 team, and can they stop the run against a good Division 5 team? Trouble on both ends against Stafford. They get another chance of it against North Stafford, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. But there should be some good games around the area, no matter where you are. Certainly hope that you're able to get out and see an area high school football game. Remember, ask your coach or athletic director to send videos in to me, mark@v2sn.com, on Twitter @Mark Coleman V2SN. I tell you what, also give these guys a follow. This is part of the FLS Varsity crew. You can check them out on Twitter. They are @FLS Varsity. They have a website, flsvarsity.com. There's also a link on the left side of the Fredericksburg.com page, there where it says FLS Varsity, I believe. Well, you guys are awfully consistent, or you're just not very creative. I'm not sure what the deal was there. But always a good follow. You can keep up with the Friday night scoreboards and all of the latest news, notes, information, stats, pictures. You know what? There's also a link to this show there. That might have been how they found us.
And I'm told that 80% of people who watch this show 40 times in a week make the playoffs. I'm told that.
I'm starting to think that 80% of the people who make fun of the host don't show up the next week on the show. I'm not sure how that plays out. But we'll tune in next week to find out. How about that, folks? How's that for a wrap-up? It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate, you know what? I do appreciate the good discussions here, the lively discussions. My good friends from the Freelance Star Sports Department. Justin Rice, Nathan Warters, fellas, thanks as always. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for this week's installment of Varsity 360. Come back next week when we take a look at Week 2 highlights, news, and notes, and we'll preview Week 3 for you right here at fredericksburg.com and flsvarsity.com. For the Virginia Varsity Sports Network, I'm Mark Coleman. Thanks for watching, everyone.